All right, well, seeing as it is 2:01, we will get started on our January learning session for the Best for All project. We are so excited to have you all here joining us on this Monday afternoon. Thanks to all 23 of our teams participating in the Best for All project. We're about a year and a half into this project, and so appreciate your continued commitment to ensuring respectful care for all patients. We have a great webinar scheduled for you all today. We're honored to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Buddy Creech, to today's webinar. Dr. Creech will provide valuable insights into the history of vaccines, strategies for addressing vaccine hesitancy, and effective approaches for engaging in meaningful conversations with parents and patients on this important topic. This learning session is a part of the Best for All project, which aims to ensure respectful care for each and every patient. One key element to the Best for All project is to enhance parent and patient education, and we are confident that Dr. Creech's expertise will equip you with these tools and knowledge to continue delivering exceptional care to every patient. Before I hand it over to Dr. Creech, we will have a brief word from our project leaders, Dr. Rolanda Lister and Dr. Karen Skatsina.
Hi, Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to hear about RSV and vaccine hesitancy, particularly during this time where that is becoming more of an issue. We're seeing outbreaks of diseases. I think it's really important to kind of understand the root of it. So thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to learn about the RSV Summit and vaccine hesitancy. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. I just want to echo Dr. Lister's welcome. It's great to see so many friends and colleagues here today. We're looking forward to a great learning session.
Thank you, Dr. Skatsina and Dr. Lister. And now Dr. Skatsina is going to introduce Dr. Buddy Creech.
Thanks, Anastasia. So I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Creech. Dr. Buddy Creech is the Edie Carroll Johnson Chair and Professor of Pediatrics in the Division of Pediatric Infectious Diseases at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville, Tennessee. There, he serves as Director of the Vanderbilt Vaccine Research Program. Dr. Creech leads a clinical and translational research team that is addressing important infectious diseases across the lifespan. His team focuses primarily on the clinical development of new vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics. Sorry, my computer was talking to me. His team focuses primarily on the clinical development of new vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics, while also ensuring that those we currently have are safe and effective. His team's work spans pneumonia, musculoskeletal infections, influenza, Staphylococcus aureus, C. difficile, pertussis, RSV, and COVID-19. Thank you again, Dr. Creech, for being with us today.
Yeah, my goodness, I'm excited about being here, and hopefully you can hear me okay and you can see the slides okay. And yeah, we're going to talk about vaccines, and I know this is meant to be a little bit focused on RSV, and we're going to get to that point. But what I also want to do is zoom out just a little bit to talk about where we are with vaccines and immunizations more broadly, and then to think with you about how we address these issues about vaccine hesitancy, vaccine skepticism, or even vaccine refusers. And the way I want to start with that is really just to talk about what a vaccine is. But before we do that, let me give you just a few disclosures, because I think this is really important. I'm going to talk about vaccines today, and I have some conflicts of interest. I receive NIH grants and CDC grants, as well as funding from both Moderna and Pfizer to Vanderbilt for the purpose of conducting clinical trials of new vaccines. And then because of the work that I do in vaccinology and because of my work in infectious diseases, sometimes I'll be asked to serve as a consultant to different companies. And so a company might say, can you tell me a little bit about whether you think it would be important for us to develop a croup vaccine or a norovirus vaccine? Let us tell you some of the data we have, and you tell us whether or not you think that's a good idea. So that's the consultancy work that I do. And then I review one chapter or one section in UpToDate and get a little bit of royalties from that. So let's start with what is a vaccine? And I think the reason this is important is that I gave a talk the other day to a civic group here in town in Nashville. And vaccine is becoming a difficult word in some sectors. And the challenge of it is that it's really derived from smallpox vaccination because vaccinia is the virus that causes smallpox. And for some reason, we still call the things we do vaccines because they originated from the smallpox vaccine. I think we can actually do better than that, but everything else sounds a little bit too weird. An immunization, that's a mouthful. An immune enhancer, well, it's not really that. So what is a vaccine? And I'm going to suggest that first and foremost, it's a flight simulator. We would never invite an aspiring pilot who's never been in a cockpit before to get into a plane and say, look, we'll walk you through everything. Here's hoping for the best. We wouldn't do that. Instead, we build a flight simulator that for all intents and purposes looks exactly what the inside of a cockpit would look like, but has no side effects of it. It has no potential fatalities. It has no ability to actually crash the plane. All right, I think we can actually use this flight simulator model as a way to talk to families about what vaccines are. What is a vaccine? It's a flight simulator for your immune system. It gives you a piece or a component, an aspect of the thing that we really need you to be protected against. But rather than risk it in the real world and ask you to fly a plane that you've never flown before, from an immunologic standpoint, instead of asking you to do that, we're just going to ask you to respond to this one part, because if you respond well to that one part, you're going to be able to respond to the real thing when it comes along. How do vaccinations compare to immunizations? Are they the same? And I'm going to tell you that vaccines are a type of immunization. Vaccines are things that we give you that are really active immunization. We give you something that triggers your body's immune response so that not only can you respond to it right now, but you lay down a little bit of a memory. You lay down a memory to that infection so that 5, 10, 15 years later, you can recall that not as if you've never seen it before, but as if someone that you're experienced, you're trained in it. Now that's different than some of our immunizations that are passive immunizations. So we have active immunizations, we call those vaccines. We have passive immunizations. These would be like the nirsevimab or clesrovimab that you may be seeing for passive protection against RSV. And in a way, this is like filling up the immunologic gas tank. This is what we did with COVID-19 monoclonals for those who needed the antibodies that we need to fight a particular infection, but maybe the person doesn't have the ability to respond, or maybe they've had a vaccine side effect before and can't get the vaccine, or maybe it's an infection that this is all we have for that particular disease. So I want you to think about vaccines as a flight simulator, and I want you to think about things like monoclonal antibodies as filling up the immunologic gas tank. So let's talk about vaccine regulation, because the other key component right now as we think about vaccine hesitancy is I think we need to do a better job showing our work. We need to do a better job of describing how things got to where they are now. And so let me give you a little bit of history. So by the end of the 19th century, there were a bunch of human vaccines that were already in use. Vaccinia, that was the use of cowpox to prevent the smallpox virus infection. Edward Jenner is really who's credited for that, but the ancient Chinese had done it for centuries. Rabies was introduced by Pasteur, by Louis Pasteur. Plague was a heat-killed vaccine. Cholera was an attenuated strain of the vaccine. Typhoid was heat-killed. So you're getting a theme here, right? We took the crude infection, killed it or heated it or did something to it, and then just gave that to people. And then diphtheria antitoxin. And in fact, the creator of this antitoxin, Emil von Behring, he's actually the recipient of the first Nobel Prize in medicine. But really importantly, there were actually no regulations that regarded their development or their administration. And I think one of the best examples of this is the rabies vaccine. So in 1885, this kid Jacob Meister, was bitten by a rabid dog. And his parents brought him to Louis Pasteur and said, what can you do to help? And Pasteur's like, well, I've been working on some rabid rabbits and I've got some spinal tissue from them. Why don't I vaccinate your boy with that because it looks like it prevents rabies in dogs? And the parents were like, sure, because otherwise it's going to be fatal. So, really importantly, Pasteur was a chemist. He was not a physician. This would never pass any sort of muster today. But as it turned out, this approach worked. And then Meister ended up serving as a caretaker of the facilities at the Pasteur Institute for all of his adult life until he passed away. So this is an example of where there were no regulations, but thankfully it worked. There are other situations where things didn't go as well. So this is in 1901 in St. Louis. There were 13 children who died from tetanus contaminated diphtheria antitoxin. So the way this used to happen is that you would give a little bit, let's say, of diphtheria to a horse. They would make a ton of antibody and you would harvest it. Well, one of the horses had died of tetanus, but that lot of antitoxin was still released. And so there were those individuals, those 13 children who died from that contaminated antitoxin. At the same time, in Camden, New Jersey, there was a tetanus outbreak that was linked to a contaminated smallpox vaccine. So what that led to in 1902 was this Biologics Control Act, where the US Congress decided to regulate the sale of viruses, serums, toxins, and similar products. And that's really the origin story of our regulatory principles even today. So over 100 years of knowing how to do that. But despite that, there have been some learning opportunities along the way. And one of the most famous of those is the Cutter incident that occurred during the time of launching polio campaigns in the 50s and the 60s. And this book by Paul Offit is a really great book to describe some of the issues around vaccine science regulation. So there were over 250 cases of polio that were attributed to vaccines that were produced by Cutter Laboratories. And you're like, Cutter Labs, that sounds familiar. And it should, because they make bug spray. They make mosquito repellent, Cutter, deep woods kind of stuff, similar to Off. Well, they used to make vaccines, but they don't anymore, in large measure because of this. So the vaccine, even though they had passed the required safety testing, the vaccine actually contained a little bit of live polio virus, so that when it was launched into the wild, that live polio caused actual polio disease. From this, generated a series of changes to how we actually regulate and do all of this. And there are really 4 steps in it. The first step, and I talk to parents about this who express hesitancy because I want them to know that there is no greater regulated system than some of our drug development and our vaccine regulations. So here's number 1. You prepare a bunch of stuff to prove that it works. And usually we do that in animal studies. We do that under strict regulations, and we do it in usually a variety of animals, including those that are in early development. So we make sure that it doesn't harm an animal that's developing. Those are usually mice. Then there's a submission of a new drug application to the FDA. The FDA requires safety and efficacy testing to make sure not only is it safe, but it does what we say it's going to do. And then finally, there's a submission of all these steps of data, these phase 1 trials that are first in human, these phase 2 trials that harness the dose in the right way, the phase 3 trials that say it work. All of that goes through final review and licensure from the FDA. So vaccine hesitancy around this process is not new. This is a very famous cartoon that many of you have seen probably multiple times. It was done in the days of Jenner, and it talked about, quote, the wonderful effects of the new inoculation. And remember, this was milkmaids who would get cowpox lesions on their hands. Well, they would go away and then they were protected against smallpox. But what you can see depicted in this cartoon are people turning into cows because of this cowpox inoculation. And so hesitancy's always been around. Let's talk about what it actually is. So I think the best definition is that it's a state of indecision and uncertainty about vaccines before that decision is made to act or not to act. And it's complex, it's context specific, it varies over time and place, and it's actually often vaccine specific. And it exists along a spectrum. And so I'm going to describe at least 6 parts of that spectrum. You've got some that are super apathetic. They just don't care about vaccines. Some of them get them when they have time. These are people that often don't have primary care providers. They go to the doctor when they're sick. They seek out a healthcare provider when they've got something that they need. But if you tell them to get a vaccine, they'll probably do it because they just don't care. You've got those that are super accepting. They may be very health literate. They may not be, but they respect the job or the office of healthcare provider and clinician. And if you tell them that they should be vaccinated, they'll get vaccinated. It's like me going to the mechanic and the mechanic says you need new brakes. I usually just accept that. I'd love not to because brakes are super expensive, but I'll usually just say yes because I don't know a whole lot about cars. Um, the third group is questioning, and that's actually the group that's rising the fastest, and I'm great with that. I think we should embrace those who are questioning vaccines. It just means we need to have answers, and it means that we need to be prepared to be able to communicate in a way that's effective. And sometimes those of us in healthcare, and especially in science, we do a crappy job communicating, and that's on me, and that's on us. We just have to do better at that, and create a value proposition that says, no, 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 this is important. I have some answers. Let's talk through this. The fourth group is hesitant. These are the people that say, yeah, I have questions, but my new default position is going to be not to do it because of all the things I've seen and I've read. And the problem right now, and this is where I will hate on social media, the algorithms box us in so much into what we've read or seen before that eventually we get into a corner of the internet where we don't hear competing views quite as easily. Or if we do, we hear them from a place of satire or poking fun at it rather than engaging it. These are harder people to connect with. I personally enjoy this because I love dispelling myth. I use a technique called counter catechesis that's very ancient that says, you've heard it said that there have been no placebo-controlled trials of vaccines. Just one person. You've heard it said that there's mercury in vaccines, but I tell you that there's actually not any mercury in any vaccines. And despite taking it out 20 years ago, we've seen no change in the rates of autism. You've heard it said that measles vaccine causes autism because of a paper in the 1990s by Andrew Wakefield in the UK. But I tell you that that paper was retracted because his authors found out he was falsifying the data. It turns out that MMR doesn't cause autism unless it also causes time travel. Because in many of those children, their biopsy specimens that were, quote, positive for measles were actually taken prior to them ever receiving a measles vaccination. That's one strategy. The next two are the ones that we really have a hard time connecting with. Those are vaccine refusers. Under no circumstances am I going to get a vaccine. Sometimes historically, these have been in closed communities like our Mennonite population, our Amish population, sometimes our Orthodox Jewish populations, but it's growing in the number of people who just flat out refuse everything. We're going to have to talk about that one, hopefully in the Q&A a little bit. And then there are the conspiracists who say, the only reason that the government wants you to get a COVID-19 vaccine is so that they can track you and know exactly where you are at all times. And I'm like, you know what? They're already doing a fine job as it is with my iPhone. I don't think they need an injectable to do that. So these are some ideas around the spectrum of hesitancy. Let's talk about the scope of it. This is not a political map, even though it's colored red and blue. These are the rates of vaccine hesitancy across zip codes. And this is from December 2021. This is during the peak of the pandemic where, quite frankly, we just screwed a bunch of stuff up. I think we all did the best we could during that time. But my goodness, if we could run that back, I guarantee there are some things we would do differently. I don't know if we would mandate vaccine the same way we did. I don't know that we would have kept kids out of school as long as we did. There's so many things I wish we could go back and redo, and hopefully we'll be prepared for the next one a little bit better. The more red this is, the more hesitancy there is. The more blue it is, so colder, that means the lower rate of vaccine hesitancy. And why I show this graph or this figure is because of two things. Number one, if you were to see a map of hesitancy in the late 1900s, we were most worried about Washington State, Oregon, and California. We just assumed the entire West Coast was going to fall off the map because they were going to have measles and whooping cough and polio because we could not get them to be vaccinated. There was a strong natural movement. There was a strong hippie movement. And it was very much on the left side of the political spectrum. Well, now it certainly appears that vaccine hesitancy is on the right side of the political spectrum in our two-party system. And that actually matches where we see hesitancy now. It's the Southeast, it's the heartland, it's the upper Midwest. It's not so much in cities, but in more rural areas. I think what this means is that we have some trust issues. I think we have some messaging issues. I think we have a value proposition issue, meaning we've got to make vaccines sound appealing to folks. The reason we have to do that is because when, just like dominoes, when one vaccine falls over, it tends to affect the other ones as well. All it took was for there to be concerns about COVID-19 vaccination for then people to get very concerned about other vaccines as well. We saw it with MMR in the late 90s. There was hesitancy around MMR. Turns out that bled over into other vaccines as well. So this is why we need to be really thoughtful about what we're recommending, how we're recommending it, and having confidence in what that recommendation looks like. All right, now let's talk about some specific things about vaccine hesitancy that I want you to be equipped for as you have conversations with your teams, with your staff, or with families. The first one is this. Humans, like, I'd love to say that we're smart and creative and all this kind of stuff, and we are. We're also incredibly stupid. And one of the places where I see myself even struggling is in causation and correlation. I think we have to remind ourselves that causation is a very small portion within the larger circle of correlation. I usually tell this story. My son has only broken 2 bones in his entire life. He broke his arm falling out of a tree, and he broke his collarbone in our front yard throwing a football while he had his broken arm, which is a whole story unto itself. Those are the only 2 bones he's ever broken. He's also only eaten at Crystal Burgers twice in his life. Now, you can judge me separately from that. I'm from Chattanooga. I'm not supporting Crystal like I should. I actually agree with you. I stink as a father. However, 2 bones broken, 2 times ever at Crystal. Do you know the 2 times he's eaten at Crystal? Within 3 hours prior to both of his bones being broken. Those are the only 2 times he's eaten at Crystal. So every time he's eaten at Crystal, he's broken a bone. Every time he's broken a bone, Crystal has been in his belly 3 hours prior. Did Crystal cause his broken bones? Man, I wish they did, because then I could sue them. But they didn't. They were correlated, not causal. Here's some of my favorite examples that I share with parents. If you look at per capita cheese consumption on the y-axis, and then you look at the number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets on the right part of the x-axis, and then you look at it over time, there is near perfect correlation between cheese consumption and dying because you get twisted up in your bed sheets. Or if you look at the incidence of autism in purple, graphed alongside organic food cells, the R value here is 0.997. And I would tell you that any R value greater than 0.7 or 0.8 means nearly perfect correlation, which would be 1.0. I don't think Whole Foods has caused autism. I think they are correlated graphically. I don't think they're causal. Or my personal favorite, if you look at the stork population of the United Kingdom, and that's on the x-axis, and you look at the population of new births on the y-axis, there is great correlation between the stork population of the UK and the number of new births. I don't think storks bring babies, but they're correlated with each other. So one of the things we have to talk to our parents about is when we think about adverse events, we think about things that are happening in our culture, like obesity or inflammatory diseases or autoimmune diseases or autism. We need to recognize that there are things that might be correlated that don't have causation. That's an important piece. All right. One of the last major concepts I want to bring up before we take one of these for a spin and then invite you for questions is this idea of the man riding the elephant. If you were to ask a man who's on top of an elephant riding him, he comes to a fork in the road, he goes left instead of right, and you go to him and you say, "Why did you go left?" The rider of the elephant might say, "Well, the sun was better on that side. I saw some water over there. Maybe the vegetation was a little bit better for the elephant." Do you know the real reason he went to the left versus the right? Because the elephant went to the left. He's riding an elephant. He can't control something that large. He went left because the elephant went left, And then he made up some reasons that make sense for why he went to the left. This idea is the basis for moral foundation theory. Now, before you read this slide, there are two books that have changed my life a lot over the last few years. One of them is called The Anxious Generation. Basically, will get you and your family off social media immediately because of the difficulties that it does to our brains. And then number two is The Righteous Mind. Both of them written by Jonathan Haidt, who is a sociologist. He was at the University of Virginia. Now he's at New York University. He and others have talked about moral foundation theory, and this is a set of innate intuitions that lead us to certain emotional responses, like approval or disapproval to particular events. And then we make moral decisions based on these emotional intuitive processes, and then we develop post hoc reasons and justifications for them. One example of this might be if you were to put potato chips or chocolate in front of me, I'm going to pick chips 100% of the time. My wife is going to pick dark chocolate 100% of the time. That's just how we're made. Is one better than the other? No. It's just how I do salty, she does sweet. Sometimes if you give me something salty inside of something sweet, it's game on, but that's just how we're made. And I could come up with some reasons for that deal with I don't drink enough water, so I need some salt. All of it's whatever. It's just how I'm made. It's like a taste bud. So what Jonathan Haidt talks about are a set of 6 primary foundations that I want us to think about as taste buds. And I'm going to show you 6 domains. And as I tell you about each one of them, I kind of want you to assign at least one of them to yourself. I want you to look at one of these 6 and say, you know, that one's one that really resonates with me, or I can see that really resonating with me. And then we're going to talk about the implications of it for hesitancy. So there's care for others. Maybe Mother Teresa is a good example of this. Of no matter what, I'm going to protect people from harm. I'm going to care for them. That's a driving motivator for me. The second might be purity. This might be those who live in closed communities like the Mennonite or Amish communities who are very built on moral purity, dietary food laws, things like that. Loyalty. I show the cheeseheads from Green Bay. Apologies, they lost this weekend. There are a lot of Bears fans that are pretty excited about that. Loyalty is like no matter what, I'm going to be loyal to my squad, my crew. Bottom left is fairness. Every 3-year-old is like this. That's not fair. That was mine. The way that works out in adults is no matter what, we're going to pursue fairness. We're going to make sure everybody has an equal playing field. In the middle bottom is authority. These are individuals that respect and honor authority that is above them, and they respect and honor the authority that they have as they maybe administer that over those that are below them in the structure. And then bottom right is liberty. Give me liberty or give me death. Individual freedom is paramount. Don't tell me what to do. All right, as you think about where you might align, I might set you up for a few things. Number one, depending on where you are in age, some of these may differ. Those who are a little bit older and seasoned might have a little greater respect for authority than those who might be in the 18 to 29, 30 range. That's not bad, it's just how it is. And as you look at these, you know, I might say that I'm particularly drawn to 1 or 2 of these, but I can see the benefits of all 6 of these, right? If we were living on a desert island and there were 6 people, all with these characteristics, that would make for a pretty good society. We'd have somebody looking out for each other, somebody promoting fairness, but not so much fairness that people don't have individual choice. There's loyalty to the group in case somebody tries to attack us. We've got loyalty. There's some sort of structure to what we're doing, like authority, and then there's some purity going on. We're not going to just be Lord of the Flies around here, just doing whatever we want. There's going to be some moral purity around that. Maybe somebody tell us, don't eat from that bush. Those berries are poisonous. You can see how all 6 of these work together, maybe for human flourishing. What I think is interesting is that when people have looked at this from a political standpoint, there are some things that stand out. Those who might show themselves to be a little bit more progressive or liberal are typically motivated by things like protecting from harm and fairness. Do we have proof of that? Sure. Things like social safety nets and Medicare and universal health care and basic needs. Those would be maybe a more progressive platform, not mutually exclusive. Those that are conservative might be more motivated by purity, respect for authority, and loyalty, but both in the United States are going to be motivated by liberty. Now, what do you think are the ones that are most paramount for those that are vaccine hesitant? There's two of them. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, if to a vaccine hesitant person, I say, you should get this vaccine because it protects the people around you, that's a great motivator. It's not going to work for them. What are they motivated by? So those who would rate on a validated scale that they have a medium level of hesitancy, they're driven by purity. Don't put that thing in my body. I don't understand what it is. Acceptance, low hesitancy, is often driven by respect for authority. My clinician, my healthcare provider, my PCP told me to get it. I'm going to get it. High level hesitancy is driven primarily by purity and liberty. I don't understand what that is. Don't put that in my body. Number two, don't tell me what to do. Sidebar. What did we do during the pandemic? You have to get this vaccine or you're a terrible person or you can't work, can't go to school, can't go to a restaurant, can't fly. You have to do this. That violated some people's sense of liberty. Maybe it needed to. We're not going to, relitigate that, but it challenged that sense of liberty. What was the second thing about that? It's an mRNA vaccine. What the crap is an mRNA vaccine? Oh, we've never had one of those before. What? Yeah, but it's been tested. How long does it normally take to make a vaccine? 10 to 20 years. How long did it take to make this one? Well, about 10 to 20 years, but the clinical trials were actually really truncated because that's all we did in infectious diseases. We did it the exact same way, but we sped it up. And then they're like, wait, what's mRNA again? It's not something people had in their brains. So I tell you that because in essence, we kind of challenged the two things that we think about the most with vaccine hesitancy: purity and liberty. So I'm going to end with a couple of things about decision making. Number one, and this is work by Daniel Kahneman, we have two systems in play when we make decisions, including about vaccines. The first is very fast, intuitive, and emotional. That's built on those moral foundations. And system two is more slow, deliberate, analytical. Almost all of our decisions are made using system one. And then we step into system two when something's more complex and more unfamiliar. And to do that, we have these things that are, we have the study of heuristics, or these ideas around mental shortcuts that simplify our decision making. And it basically gives us a practical way to make quick decisions that are, quite frankly, good enough. There are two that I want you to know about in terms of how people make decisions. The first is the default effect. It's the tendency to accept a default position or a default option. This is why it's critical for your teams, your hospital systems, your colleagues, you yourself, to normalize and to assume that people want to be vaccinated. That presumptive approach is associated with a drastically higher likelihood of getting vaccinated. What does that look like? Mr. Jones, thanks for coming in today. Today's a day that we can give you your flu shot. We have them in the office. I'm going to go ahead and ask my team to draw that up so it's ready for you when we finish this visit. It's presuming that they want to be vaccinated. Why would we do that? Because 85% of the time they do. It's the minority that don't want to be vaccinated. If they have questions, let them ask their questions, but make a presumptive declaration of, we've got it, I'm going to presume that you want it. That's still the right thing to do, and it's associated with better uptake. The second one is the fluency heuristic, and this is becoming a bigger issue with the rise of podcasts and social media. The more skillfully or elegantly an idea is communicated, the more likely it is to be considered seriously, whether or not it's logical. So some of the people who are making, from a scientific and medical standpoint, redonkulously weird recommendations, they sound really good doing it. And then you've got those of us who are scientists or physicians and in healthcare. And sometimes we just don't talk so good and we don't know how to communicate effectively. And that's where we get into trouble. One of those sounds good and engaging. One of those is something else. The something else loses. So we've got to figure out how to have really good conversations with folks. There's some other biases that occur that I want you to be aware of. Confirmation bias is the tendency to believe things that confirm our preconceptions. This is why things like Facebook and TikTok and Twitter, they put you into a box of the internet that it's hard to get out of. An anchoring bias, sometimes we rely too heavily on the first piece of information we get. This is used against us at stores. On the left is price A of $500. On the right is price B, $1,000 crossed off to be $500. Which one is cheaper? They're the same. Which one should you buy? I don't know. But from the jump, you think that price B or option B is a better way to do it. Why? Because it was $1,000, but now it's half off. I'm getting a deal. Maybe not. They may have just upcharged it to begin with. Loss aversion, we prefer to avoid loss than to acquire gain. This is why so many parents are motivated by, I'm okay if something bad happens to my child. I'm not okay if I caused it. That's avoiding loss as a result of something I did rather than acquiring the gain of immunity. That one's a harder one to get through. And then overconfidence bias. We often overestimate our own abilities or accuracy. Did I mention that humans are silly? All right. So what can we do? I'm going to use RSV as an example, and I think we need to do this. I think we need to have intellectual humility. I think Mark Twain is the one who said, it's not what we don't know that hurts us. It's what we think we know that just ain't so. I need to have humility that I don't know everything there is to know about medicine. And when someone describes a side effect from a vaccine, I need to start with the Howard Baker, former political, huge figure in Tennessee. I need to start with, you know what, you might be right. That might have been caused by the vaccine. Let's talk about that. Let's think through this together. I need to have intellectual humility. I need to have consistent communication. If I'm saying different things at different times, that's going to confuse people. I need to stay on message as best I can and find some tricks for that, like the flight simulator, like filling up the immunologic gas tank. And then we need to find common ground. If you've been frustrated by those who are vaccine hesitant or avoidant, those who don't want anything at the time of birth, no vitamin K, no hepatitis B, take a step back and realize we actually both want the same thing. We both want that child to be healthy. We're going about it in different ways. And so let's find some common ground. And I think we need to seed that ground and say, look, I think we actually want the same thing here. And I'd love to think through how we can get there. For me, if hepatitis B vaccine needs to come a month later in a woman with no risk factors for Hep B and who's been tested and found negative for Hep B, but it does allow me to get vitamin K on board, I'll throw Hep B under the bus. That's fine. We kind of cut our losses as we can until we can have another conversation about Hep B. So find common ground. So what about RSV? This one's under a lot of attack right now, and I want to finish with this as you think about putting questions in the chat. RSV is the most common reason for hospitalization during infancy. You have to know that stat. It is the most common reason historically why kids come to the hospital during infancy. And we have 3 ways we can prevent it. Vaccinate moms, immunize babies, not with an RSV vaccine, but with a monoclonal antibody, fills up a gas tank, and vaccinating the grandparents through older adult immunization. So maternal immunization, and I went ahead and put the brand here because it's important to recognize that of the 2 and now 3 vaccines that are available, Pfizer is the only one that has an indication for moms. Maternal immunization leads to protection in the mother, as well as passive transfer of antibodies to the infant. We vaccinate during the 3rd trimester between 32 and 36 weeks because there was an imbalance in the clinical trials between the rates of preterm delivery between RSV vaccine and what? A placebo. Yet another placebo-controlled trial. But then since licensure, there's actually been no increase in preterm delivery that's been observed. And remember that these studies were done worldwide to support worldwide licensure. You have to be able to show that you did studies in or around the country of licensure in order for them to consider it. And there were some places that just have higher rates of preterm delivery overall. And that may be one of the reasons there was a little bit of an imbalance during those trials. Infant antibody looks different. So there is no RSV vaccine for infants, but there are 2 long-acting antibodies that are better than the old Synagis that we used to have. They're called nirsevimab, which is called Beyfortus, and clesrovimab, which I cannot remember the name to save my life because I didn't put it on the slide. And it's brand new, and it can be given intramuscularly at birth, and it protects for at least 5 to 6 months. Both are highly effective at reducing hospitalization, maybe as high as 80%, even in the kids that would be high risk, like kids with congenital heart disease, with neurodevelopmental disorders, those with chronic lung disease. The challenge right now is that nirsevimab can be given in the second year of life as well for those kids who still have very high risk conditions. Clesrovimab is not yet available in that second year because they just don't have the data yet to support it. It should be effective, but we're not there yet. So what are some frequently asked questions that we get a lot of? Should a baby receive RSV antibody if mom was vaccinated? No, both are good. Some countries only use maternal immunization. We only do that if mom delivered less than 14 days after vaccine, since that would suggest that there wasn't enough time for the baby to be protected. Is maternal vaccine better than infant immunization? Well, probably not, but you do get two for the price of one. You protect both the mom and the baby, so you get a little bit of cocooning that way. And then should grandparents get the RSV vaccine if they're eligible? Absolutely. This is the way you build a little island around the baby to say, whoever's coming into contact, whoever's eligible for vaccine, we're going to give it. We do that for pertussis. We're starting to be able to do that for RSV as well. As you think about these questions, you're going to have families say, well, I didn't think RSV antibody was now recommended for all babies. Well, it still is. The American Academy of Pediatrics still absolutely recommends nirsevimab for all babies because of those who come to the hospital, 60% of them have no risk factors whatsoever for severe RSV, but they land in the ICU. So is it worth it to give it to every baby? Yeah, it sure is, because we can prevent some from dying. Not only that, key in on this. Not only are we trying to prevent an individual baby from getting severe RSV, we're also trying to prevent our hospitals from being so full that we can't give life-saving cancer chemotherapy, that we don't have to delay surgical procedures for kids with congenital heart disease, so that we can take care of those kids who have acute behavioral health needs and need to have inpatient hospitalization. So remember, we're all in this together, and this is one of the ways we can serve each other. So with that, I'm going to stop. And I am more than happy to field your questions. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Creech. That was an incredible presentation. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to come off mute or put it in the chat.
I have a question.
Hi. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I'll come after you. You go ahead.
Thank you. This is Heather Champney. I'm pediatrician with Dr. Katsina here and director of the community newborn nurseries. And a question just came up recently about this concept of shared clinical decision making and how we get consent for, because oftentimes the nurses have already asked and they've gotten consent or refusal forms signed even before we see them. So could you speak to that just a little bit? And even if you have any idea about the legality of it, do we need to change our practice in terms of how we're consenting or not these folks?
Yeah, it's a phenomenal question because there's no guidance. I think if clarity is kindness, then this is not kind at all right now because there's just no clarity around what shared decision making looks like. I was given a talk somewhere and I quoted an old LL Cool J for everybody that's over like 45 in the audience, an old LL Cool J lyric of "Don't call it a comeback. We've been here for years." Like shared decision making is what we've always done. I've never entered into a vaccine or a vaccination with a family and not had some element of shared decision making. We say we're here to give vaccines and we talk about it if there are any questions whatsoever. So it seems as if there are some who think we haven't been doing shared decision making. I think the issue is how we document it. That's going to change probably. What's required and who can do shared decision making. And then yeah, I think those are still TBD. So what we're activating is a couple of things. Number one, we simply document that a conversation occurred. And I think in this situation, less is probably more until we have better guidance on what that looks like. So for us that use electronic medical records, it might be as easy as putting in some sort of phrase that says, we discussed the risks and benefits of the immunization schedule We have recommended these vaccinations, and the family has agreed, given their knowledge of the risks and benefits, or some language that you feel very comfortable saying. Does it matter who has that conversation? I don't know. It may eventually. Right now, I'm not sure that it does. I think Tennessee may be different than other states eventually around this. And I don't know if that's going to be more or less restrictive. I think where it's going to get into some trouble is in standing orders. I think we're going to have to be thoughtful about that and reassess those. I think those standing orders could still be possible, but it might be nice to have a prenatal shared decision making default that says we've talked about the risks and benefits and blah, blah, blah. I don't know what's going to be required more than that. What I know is that vaccines are not an invasive medical procedure like some on the current ACIP would suggest that they are. You know, amoxicillin is going to cause a lot more side effects than an influenza vaccine. So I want to be really thoughtful about what we require ourselves to do without better guidance. And right now, I would simply document somewhere in the medical record that you've had a conversation about risks and benefits, and that the family or the individual has elected to proceed with immunization. That may not be enough, but I think that's the starting place.
Hattie, did you want to ask your question?
I do. Dr. Creech, thank you. This is a great talk. My name is Patty
Oh,
Scott.
thanks.
I'm a nurse practitioner neonatal here in Middle Tennessee.
Yeah,
And I love what you said about, I'll forgo the hepatitis B if we can talk about vitamin K and I can get that. I'm much
right.
more interested in vitamin K. And I like what you said about broaching it as you expect that they're going to want it.
Mm, yeah,
So do you mind just kind of giving an example of how you would do that? Maybe when
yeah,
you've gotten the heads up that this family does not want vitamin K, do you mind just kind of modeling how you would do
yeah,
that,
yeah,
sir?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And when people have already signaled their hesitance, it's very difficult to take that presumptive approach, because by doing so, you either are immediately causing a conflict with them, or you're signaling that you actually don't know previous conversations that have occurred. And I don't think that's settling for people, right? If they've expressed to their OB, let's say, that they don't want vitamin K or hepatitis B, and you
Mm-hmm.
come in with a presumptive approach that says, I'm giving these, they're going to freak out and you've lost already. So that's
Okay.
number one. The presumptive approach only works when you haven't already been signaled that they're going to say no. All right,
Okay, that
number
makes
two.
sense.
Yeah, number two, when you've gotten the signal that somebody is going to refuse, here's what I typically do. I walk in and say, hey, there's other stuff that we're talking about, and say, hey, before I leave or as part of this, I'll say, now I understand from my colleagues that you are not currently interested. Currently is the important word. Not currently. I give them an out. Not currently interested in getting vitamin K or Hep B. Are those, and then I would say, are those coming together, or do you have specific concerns about each one? Because I happen to be trained in this, and this is what I do for a living. And if there are questions that you've got that you just don't feel like you've gotten answers to, or you want to take into account some of the things that I might have experienced, I would love to have that conversation. What are you doing with that? You're saying you're not creating an expert non-expert dynamic where they have to do what you say. You're saying, I may have some information here. You're inviting a conversation. I remember when I was a little kid, I read a book about vampires, and I was scared to death about vampires, to the point that for the next 20 years of my life, I slept with the sheets around my neck, because I figured if a vampire came in the middle of the night, he'd have to pull down the sheets. I'd wake up, I'd punch him in the face, but avoid his teeth, and I'd be fine. And then one of my colleagues here at Vanderbilt said, you're a dummy. Don't you know that you have to invite vampires in? They can't just fly in your window. And I'm like, well, I wish somebody had told me that when I was like an 8-year-old. So in the same way that happens around vampires, I'm telling you, you've got to get that family to invite you into the conversation. Because if you do, then number three can happen. People hate to change their minds unless they have a new reason to. Because if you
Mm,
just say you need to change your mind, they're like, no, I don't. I'm right. People hate to say they're wrong, especially dudes. We hate to say we're wrong. But if you give me an out and say, have you thought about this? Or did you know this? Did you take this into account? All of a sudden, they have the freedom to change their mind and save face. So I do that with a couple of things. I'll decouple hepatitis B from vitamin K, and I'll do that for a couple of reasons. The first reason is so that they know that I'm being thoughtful. And number two, it sometimes signals that I'm not just in the back pocket of government or the back pocket of industry or the back pocket of whomever, just blindly making recommendations. And what I'll say is, you know what? Choosing my favorite, choosing vaccines that I don't want to give would be like figuring out which kids I don't want to give a Christmas present to. Like that doesn't compute. I like them all. But if you really held my feet to the fire and said, does a newborn baby born to a mother with no risk factors for hepatitis B, with no siblings at risk for hepatitis B, who's had negative testing for hepatitis B, does that baby urgently need hepatitis B at birth? No. It's just the most efficient way to do it at a population level. So if we don't want to do that, fine. These days, sometimes I'll throw COVID under the bus and I'll say, vaccines have gotten such a bad rap from COVID. Boy, did we mess some of those things up. And I'll just say that.
Mm-hmm.
And that usually gives me a little bit of credibility with some families. And then I'll say, if you don't want to get Hep B for a few weeks, my goodness, no skin off my back. Let me just remind you why we give vitamin K so that you've heard it from me, because it's a real risk. And what I have found is that when I have those conversations, not around vitamin K, because that's usually not where I am as an infectious disease person, but when I have those types of conversations, I usually can get people to get a DTaP vaccine or a Hib vaccine. They may not get flu, they might not get COVID, they might not get hepatitis A today, but they
Mm-hmm.
usually get the other ones. And then I've got time to work with them. So I think we need to do a better job of saying, you want an alternative schedule? Fine. Do I recommend it?
Mm-hmm.
No, I think it's silly. But if you want it, like I'm gonna work with you on it. And so if they want an alternative approach for the newborn nursery that includes vitamin K but not Hep B, fine. I'm okay with that. But I think the thing that I'm gonna impress upon you the most is not just you, but everybody. Like listen to their concerns, really take it in, and then the next phrase out of your mouth should be, I've heard that. I've heard those concerns, and I've done a little bit of reading and training on this. Can I share a little bit of what I've learned? And then they're going to invite you in, yes or no. And at the end of the day, they're making the decision. I don't think we need to cajole them. I don't think we need to make them feel guilty. I don't think we need to shame them. I think we need to give them information and a safe place to change their minds. Man, that was a lot of words. Sorry about that.
But they were all great. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Patty. That's kind. Carol had a question in the chat about what percentage of babies who received RSV vaccine become hospitalized when they get RSV. So again, we have to be careful about the words. Babies don't get an RSV vaccine; they get the RSV antibody. And so, of those who get the RSV antibody, it reduces the likelihood of hospitalization by at least 80%. So the numbers don't exactly work out to say, oh, well, 20% of babies who get the get the RSV antibody or get maternal vaccination while they're in the womb, 20% of them aren't getting hospitalized. It's now a very low number. So the way you have to express what the efficacy of the vaccine is, or the efficacy of the immunization, the antibody during the first year of life, is how much does it reduce it compared to not getting it? And it cuts the rate by 80%, meaning if 100 babies got hospitalized in the old days, now that number would be 20. That's the way to look at it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Creech, and great
Of course.
questions, everyone. Dr. Creech has graciously agreed to do a podcast on Healthy Mom, Healthy Baby, and so you guys will be able to listen there and learn some additional information. Take back control. So just a few announcements from Best for All. Our next huddle is February the 12th at 2 o'clock Central. Your Best for All homework is to submit your Q4 data if you have not yet done so. And then register for TIPQC's annual meeting. I'll have the QR code in the next one of the next slides, but we'd love to see you there. There is still time to submit your abstract highlighting your quality improvement work for the TIPQC annual meeting. Today is the deadline, but if you email us, I believe we can give an extension. And those are any quality improvement work related to maternal, infant, joint maternal and infant, or respectful care quality improvement work. It does not have to be a TIPQC project. And then we have a few additional upcoming webinars. We have the severe maternal morbidity webinar on Wednesday at 12 o'clock Central. And then we have our February Heart Series, Building a Multidisciplinary Care Team on February the 6th, and Effective Patient Event Debriefs on February the 20th. You can find those registration links at tipqc.org/events. And then our annual meeting, March 24th through 26th in Franklin, Tennessee. We would love to see you there. And you will hear about all the great work going on throughout the state and nation. And we heard today that TDH has some free resources available to hospital teams related to safe sleep. And so you can find those on the REDCap order form. If you have any questions, you can email Autumn Montgomery Hayes at tn.gov. Trying to post the link, but it won't let me, so I will follow up with it via email. And that is all we have today. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Creech, for your time and expertise. It was an incredible webinar. And we would love it if you guys would take our post-huddle survey. Just scan that QR code and let us know how we can improve. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.